Thanks everybody again for joining this series that we're doing to help with financial stress and impact on families and hurricanes and the different things that are critical issues that come up in people's life that they may or may not be prepared for. So tonight's topic is going to be financial trauma and family dynamics. So we're going to answer hopefully several questions that people have out there, and this is very beneficial to them. Our panelists tonight will be from Dollars and Good Cents. It will be Debbie Todd and Larry Frazier. From Seedling, it'll be Richard Ciarletta. And Charles Bartlett will be joining us, who has his MBA and is almost done with his clinical mental health counseling, which makes a great panel for tonight's discussion. With that panel, let's start with the first question we have. How can financial issues strain family relationships?
I will definitely say the more stress that there is in any family dynamic will definitely cause other issues to surface. Resentment with financial issues can happen, between spouses and I've had that personally in my life when I've gone through financial hardships with my ex-wife. And yeah, it can bring up a whole load of issues or just the emotions that make some issues even heavier, even larger.
That's great, Richard. Maybe what I'd like to do is maybe just start with just kind of defining what financial trauma is. I think that would kind of help us kind of put this together. But Richard, as you said, that financial trauma can cause all of these things, but financial trauma at its core is actually could be either something very sudden or it could be something chronic over time that has to do with finances that changes the way you perceive life, your sense of self-worth, and it just, as you said, adds to stress. So it could be something, as we talked about, financial trauma could be the hurricanes. Financial trauma could be having a sudden car wreck or losing your job. It could be your parents getting divorced. It could be somebody getting gravely ill. So there's a lot of different ways that financial trauma can occur. And I think that we will find that there's many people that experience financial trauma either at some points in their life or actually live with it throughout their life.
In that, I know you were talking about the kids and stuff, but the other part that I see that happens in the trauma, and I'll be really brief, is a family unit is like a body, is how I look at it. So any part that starts to bleed or hemorrhage can cause that financial trauma as well. So if I am the spouse that's trying to save, trying to keep us on budget, trying to take care of keeping the kids in check, but then there's that other piece over here that's not quite on the program that's leaking the money out, that can also cause some family angst and trauma in the family.
I would definitely also say, straining family relationships, anything that does cause undue stress or undue anxiety, will exacerbate things to the nth degree as they do. But then you have parents who are stressed and anxious about these things, and as much as like to hide it, kids are very perceptive and they see that, and then they're having angst and anxiety and things of that nature. So it really can, have a rippling effect in the family unit. What I was going to ask before, Charlie, is there anything specific that that comes to mind with family dynamics when stress happens like that?
Well, there's definitely blaming and lack of trust. Also, it depends on how the financial trauma happened. Was it an unfortunate event such as, a market crash or someone losing their job outside their control? Or was it interpersonal family dynamics? Like was a family member not showing up to work or not using money efficiently or making poor financial decisions? So it can really eradicate trust. And also there can be a lot of shame and guilt involved with someone making poor financial decisions in which they're not being fully transparent with other family members. So I think big things are blame and trust. Like if some kids, a family's in a tough financial situation and kids aren't able to have the same luxuries as some of their classmates or friends, they can start to blame their parents for not providing enough for them. Like kind of off the top of the bat, I would say those would be the main things that can happen in terms of family dynamic.
So very good. Now that we've defined it pretty well, so how can financial issues strain the family relationship? What can that lead to?
Yeah, Larry, that's a great question. So when you talk about what does it lead to, it leads to really just in a lot of cases, either a sudden or an over time change in how people behave. This is their relationships, right? People become hypervigilant because, as Charlie talked about, there's a lack of trust. They start to avoid people. Like, I don't want to talk to you, or because I don't trust you, or I'm not comfortable. So you start to avoid people. People are very tense, so their startle response is quick, and so they may seem jumpy or agitated. A lot of times it affects their relationships because you can't sleep. And if you can't sleep and you're tired, you have all kinds of issues. Sometimes it results in family members starting to do some self-destructive behaviors. And I think Charlie would talk about this as far as it leads to addictions. It can lead to substance abuse. It can lead to other behaviors such as cuttings and all kinds of things that we're seeing happen. And even just the anxiety. I mean, that impacts the relationships. If people are anxious, you really can't have a true, meaningful, healthy relationship when you have all of these, anxiety driven, lack of trust driven emotions that are going on within the family members.
And also there can be scenarios where the children feel a lot of like pressure to provide for the family if the parents aren't able to make ends meet. And that could either be through a job, but sometimes kids can get into illegal activity to make that money. So I mean, kids can feel a lot of responsibility, and that they're not able to just go to school, do healthy activities. They have to give up a lot of their future to make money now to make ends meet, and that also means that they're not able to save. I've seen scenarios where kids, all the money they make is going to help their parents pay off the mortgage or the rent, and so they're not able to even learn to save and start building their own wealth. So they can create that, and that can create some resentment down the future as well when kids see what they could have had if they had a parent that was financially stable and allowed them to build their wealth individually.
Charles, that was a
Charlie,
great point, because when you talk about the impact on the children, there's a lot of studies about how when children are really, when they're kind of forced to become an adult too soon, they carry that on later in life where they really have a hard time, being balanced and being calmer. So they do actually develop that sense of super responsibility and over functioning at a very early age. So that is an extremely valuable point that you bring up. Thank you.
That's exactly what happened to me. My father had a stroke when I was 13 from diabetes, and I grew up way fast. I was a full-time student and a full-time employee in college, going there and wearing a suit to school every day really didn't help with my dating life. But that was difficult. But still, the exact example or the scenario that Charlie had set up was exactly what I was doing. I was a full-time employee. All the money that I made went to, the family checking account, and they paid the bills because my father couldn't work anymore. And I wasn't saving anything for all of those years until he passed away. Because if I wasn't working, or if I was trying to save, or I was trying to do, we were going to be homeless. So that just ended up being the scenario. And as Charlie mentioned, years later, I still have resentment. That's what therapy helps with. I resented both of them for, both my parents for making those decisions and not being able to do X, Y, and Z. And some of it was rational, some of it wasn't. But yeah, 45 now, and still there's still some things there, working through. And so it can cause all types of things. Absolutely.
Okay. Somebody's in that situation, right? We've just come out of COVID. We've had a lot of people lose their jobs. We've had hurricanes. We've got all kinds of different things going on. So now I'm in those situations, and I'm not a principal person that just says, give my kids everything so then they're happy, right? Because then that creates different stresses. So what do I do? I'm trying to do the best I can. Not very good with money. Where do we start? And what steps can families take to manage financial stress together?
Well, the number one thing would be to really communicate and create a joint budget plan. You know, they need to know, okay, we know where's all the money in this family going, and then together try to identify where money's being wasted. A lot of families, they kind of are just doing their own thing. Kids might go in their parents' purse and take cash. Some might have credit cards and not know where they are, but like a lot of people are kind of spending as they please. And so really take a collaborative effort where the family gets together and outlines where is the money going, how much money are we taking in, and what can we feasibly spend. And first off, what are the absolute necessaries expenses, such as a mortgage, such as rent, gas if they need a car to get to a job. But outside of like the essential expenses, then they can look to be like, okay, what can we eliminate? That can only happen really if they actually communicate, meet together, and are transparent on where each of them are spending the money that they have.
Charlie, I agree with that. I think looking at those variable expenses, the ones that can change, the ones that are all over the plate, et cetera, and having that plan. I think I always felt the most secure with my ex-wife when we were doing that, when we both communicated, had a plan, and like you said, Charlie, a budget. And okay, at least I know where everything's coming in, what's going out, and we have an idea. But those variable expenses were always some of the ones we were always watching out for. And that's what gave us, I think, the most stress. And I would definitely say one that keeps changing constantly is just Netflix. I think it's gone from $12 to $17 to $25. We don't need, we keep trying to budget for that number or just for that service. And I have no idea what it's going to be next month. So that doing that or trying to eliminate those and having a plan is definitely good for the heart, good for the soul.
And that happens. We have a bunch of different TV tastes in 1 month, and then next thing I know, the next month I'm charged for 7 different streaming services. And I'm like, I don't need all of those. And then you cancel it, and then they try to get you to stay on it. But yeah, streaming services is definitely expensive.
I think that's a huge culprit I've been seeing around lately that is really, well, okay, if I want to watch that one show, I sign up for $7.99 a month for that new streaming service. And by Charlie, like you said, by the time you know it, you have 20 of them. It's costing you more than cable ever did, actual TV, because you have all the services. And it just gets to be very daunting. But I don't realize it. I didn't realize it was happening when we ended up with all of those until we made the budget and we saw all of them, because they were coming out at different times of the month. $7.99 here, $12.99 here on these days. So it didn't feel like just one bill came out. And I think that's a big trap for a whole bunch of people I've spoken with.
And Deb, I know you have some ideas as well. So
yeah, great. I love what you guys are saying. And Charles, you're again talking about how getting the family involved and sharing with the family, open and honest communication is so huge. And one of the things that sometimes people don't really think about quickly because they're still in stress is to sit down, like you said, look at your budget, look at what you can get rid of. Again, the streaming expenses and all of those things that just show up because you don't know that, if you don't cancel, all of those things, they show up. But they've got apps that will go out from your bank and they will look at what your charges are and they will help you eliminate them. So you can actually reach out to your bank to do those things. And a couple other things that might be helpful for people to think about is that say, oh, or you do have trauma. It's okay to share with your kids. Now, not necessarily a 2-year-old, but okay to share with your kids that, hey, sometimes we may have to call the bank and we may have to see if we can get some help with our mortgage or get, so you're teaching your kids not only the openness of it, but you're teaching them that, hey, there are times when you have to employ resources. So reach out to your bank, reach out to your credit cards, reach out to these people and your utilities in particular. And a lot of times for especially utilities, there will be programs that they have within the utilities that will allow you to either get a reduced rate or pay it on a flat rate over time to help kind of ease some of those crunches, especially if they show up suddenly, but are not necessarily expected to last a long period of time. Say you get laid off or there's a strike or some weather related instance that's going to disrupt things for 2 or 3 months. These are shorter term things that you can actually do to kind of bridge that and allow yourself that avenue over to kind of to stave out your budget.
And I'm going to throw in a little bit of a shameless plug and say that another thing is everybody's financial literacy in today's world is at different levels. So getting your family together, that's great, but your wife and you and your kids may not be talking the same language yet. I've seen that happen in families that we've done some counseling with. So, uh, financial literacy, getting a good standard there, and you can use some of our tools that are on our website at DGSF and different things like that. But there was the plug, by the way. But I'll say that I've seen families where doing financial literacy, they do a budget, and there's some people in the family that just can't spend in the budget. So they get their own little pot of money. And when it's gone, it's gone. So you take that out and you put it in the budget because I'm one of those people that if I have $5 in my wallet or $15 in my wallet, when I get home, that is gone. And I don't know where it went, anything like that. I've done the whole thing where you put you take your notepad and you write every dime down and figure it out. I still couldn't do that. But one of the things my wife and I had to do and we did it with the kids as well as they were growing up, call it an allowance, call it whatever you want. I got $40 a month that I could spend however I wanted. I didn't get asked a lot of questions, and that kept us in budget. So I didn't have to go into the big checking account and say, oh, I got $5,000. I'm going to pay this, and this off. And then I forgot that there's a mortgage there. And then all of a sudden the wife goes write the mortgage check and it's not there. So I think that everything that you guys said is right on spot, is the communication, family, things like that. But I would encourage people to get a good footing on the financial literacy at the same level. So you're talking the same game. And then I'd also say recognize what each member of the family is and does, and then try to accommodate the best way to implement that to start getting on the right track.
I agree with that. And I would say a really big risk. So obviously, you need to kind of communicate. You need to come up with a budget plan. A big risk nowadays is credit cards. Is that any family member can get a credit card? I know someone that's 31 and zero income, lives with his mom, got approved for $5,000 a month credit card. So any family member could get a credit card if they're not getting the amount of money they want, rack up a lot of debt and not an inability to pay for it. And then that's going to fall on another member of the family, or that person's have to file bankruptcy. So, I mean, aside from, like not, being short of money to pay your current obligations, something that could put you in a deeper hole is that family members are secretly getting credit cards that they're using and racking up substantial amounts of debt, which is just going to create more instability, mistrust, and financial strain on the family. So that's something to be cautious of as well.
You just nailed what you said earlier about the trust thing, because then that falls apart instantly. And people may not think what you just said, Charles, is real, but I just came from a type of a family gathering, and I found out, there's a couple of people in that family that haven't minded their finances very well as they grew older. And the father of that family just went down and bought a new truck, and he just put his daughter's name and birth date on there and social security number, and they approved the credit based on her, and he got $140,000 truck that she can't pay for. So she's trying to unwind that, but there you go back to all the different things we talk about, right? Check your credit, see what's going on your stuff, but then also getting your stuff in order and being open with your family. And that can be farther than what you need to do. And I'll say this last example to that is I help my dad take care of his finances because he's older. But he and I sit down and do his budget, and then I let him go, except we check in once a week, and he comes back and says, this is what I did, or this is what I did. And then we talk through if he's getting a little bit out of line, so that it doesn't go 6 months and then all of a sudden we have problems. So we have that open communication, and he trusts me enough and I trust him enough that I can tell him something straight and then he'll, because we've been doing this for a while, it will work out. The reason I say it that way is when we first started that, it was, why are you trying to control me and why are you in my numbers? And I was like, I'm not trying to do that, Dad. I'm just trying to help you kind of navigate this as you get older. And that communication built that trust. And now we can have a lot better communication. But that is not where we started.
It's a great point, Larry, I'll tell you. And it kind of comes back to what Charles said earlier on, is talking about honesty and transparency and communication, right? Because there has to be that safe place for us to be able to talk about these things. And, you know, as your example of somebody going out and using another family member's information and credit to get something that they A, couldn't afford, and B, is going to cause somebody else a lot of stress to try to unwind. I mean, that comes right back to what Charles was talking about as far as the spending that maybe some family members aren't necessarily proud of. And it really does take a lot of guts to be able to talk about these things. But the flip side of that is what happens is we end up with families just that are in financial trauma and in financial chaos.
And
Yeah, I think those are all great points. So let's kind of switch a little bit here, because a lot of our families that we work with have kids, right? So how do kids perceive and are affected by financial stress of their parents? But I'm going to go a step further, is not just what they perceive, but how can parents also kind of monitor and check themselves to not put that stress on their family? And it goes back to what we were talking about, a little bit of trust, a little bit of open communication and transparency. But I think there's more to that, especially with kids, age appropriate things. So I'll let you guys discuss that for a little bit.
Well, stability would be the biggest thing. Obviously, financial trauma, like a difficult financial situation of the parents, it can create more instability. So just trying to create as much stability as you can for the children is the best thing you can do. If there's certain lifestyle and the way that they go about their life changes drastically, that's going to have a much bigger impact on them. So just trying to provide as much stability as you possibly can in terms of how it's impacting their life is a big one. Like maintaining a routine. So keeping a consistent daily routine can provide a sense of security amidst financial uncertainty. So if you can keep your routine and kind of keep the normal family functionality as close to as it was before, it won't have as much of an impact on the kids as if everything goes into flux and chaos ensues. So just trying to maintain that routine and consistency in the day-to-day as best as you can is big.
Wow, that's great, Charles. And you're right. And it's interesting as adults that sometimes when we're in the middle of financial stress and chaos, that a lot of times we're so busy doing that in our own head that we don't necessarily realize how it is impacting the children. And this is, you talked about it, and Richard, you gave a great example of what happened when you had to start working earlier and how that changed the dynamic of your growing up. And children really do see these things. And the sad part is that if the children if there's not communication, if there's not openness and transparency about what's happening, in a lot of cases, the children are going to think it's their fault. I did something wrong, or if I didn't need as much, or if I didn't want as much, right? And in some cases, if I wasn't even here, it would be easier on mommy and daddy. And those are really challenging things. So, and it really does just take sitting down with them and talking with them. And as we talked about in one of the earlier episodes, having having tight finances and having situations where your lifestyle has to change temporarily or whatever, those are real situations. But you can actually just share with your children, and if you can, try to, as Charlie said, make it as normal as you can, but also to see if there's ways you can make being frugal fun. Make it a game for them. Let them feel like they're a part of it. And that will help them. And it also helps you as the parent, because I know what it was like when my husband and I, in 1993, okay, it's dating myself now. My husband got laid off from his job on Wednesday. I went to work on Friday. My plant closed. through no fault of our own, both of us did not have a job within 72 hours. And we had 4 kids at home. That was seriously stressful. But what we did is we went home and we told the kids, we're like, okay, mommy and daddy have to do some things differently now. But we said, okay, and we tried to make it a game. I mean, not belittle it because we didn't want to, make it to where that wasn't happening. But I actually have pictures of us with all of our coins because we'd save these big buckets of coins. And we had all these coins on the table and we were rolling coins into old coin wrappers. Okay, that tells you how long ago this was. And those kids still remember that because what they realized is that we were helping bring money together. We were helping gather money to take care of things. And they remembered that to this day. So there's certain small things you can do to help them just realize that it's not their fault and that you love them more than life itself and that we will get through this. And that really does help them. And it also helps us as parents because we realize that it takes the focus off of us and we say, hey, what can we do to make this better? And it allows us to get out of that crisis mode into a little more logical thinking mode. And I say that just because I lived it by experience. And I can tell you running around like a chicken with my head cut off didn't help much.
I would definitely say coming from an education background, and I've always worked in the classroom and also when I was an administrator in lower socioeconomic status areas. So finances and family dynamics were always tight and always stressful. I had some students who were homeless and, you ran the gambit with that. What I noticed that we always have to be on the lookout. And Larry, I'm answering the question you had mentioned, how are they perceiving it? What do we need to look for? We need to look at behavior issues. We need to look at behavior issues for, are they lashing out at school? Are they lashing out with their peers? Are they lashing out, in any other way? Are they doing anything out of the ordinary or normal? And that's definitely going to give you a tip off that they are getting affected by it. And you would have to employ some of the strategies we've talked about with sitting them down, talking with them, doing something different because you're ending up, the situation is starting where I've seen it in my experience in schools and districts, getting a lot worse if it's not nipped in the bud, quickly or quicker. If it's not taken care of and it's not talked about, then it can get worse and worse and worse. And it's like a snowball effect. So keeping an eye on children's behavior and how they're dealing with, even when it's with their siblings, if they're lashing out with their siblings, that could also be an indicator.
Well, I'll probably make all 3 of you cringe here for a few minutes, but I'll try not to. A couple of thoughts that I have is there's a song. So if parents don't think their kids perceive what's going on and what they say and what they do, there's a country and western song where the guy talks about he slammed on the brakes and the kid's food falls in the floorboard and he says a 4-letter word. And then the kid, he goes, "Where'd you learn that?" And he goes, "From you, Dad." Right? I want to be just like you. So though it's a song, they are very perceptive. So the things that I've learned through time and raising kids and doing some of that is one, there is a time for parents, whether they're together or separate, that there has to be some teamwork involved between the parents that doesn't involve the kids. In other words, you don't do this financial planning and everything in the whole world in front of the kids about what your budget's going to be and what you're going to cut, what you're not going to cut. You come up with the plan and then you discuss the plan with them and then get their ideas in. And so if there's going to be a little angst in there, which finances tend to bring up a little angst, that's not the place to do it from scratch in front of the kids, and we're going to work all through it. So that's one thing I learned is there's a time for the adults to talk and then there's a time for the family to talk. So working on that helps the perception. That also then brings in consistency from the parents. So you guys talked about a consistent, regular thing, but one of the things I see that blow things up a lot is, well, you told me no, I'm going to go ask Dad. And then Dad says yes. And so then all of a sudden things get out of whack that way as well. And that comes into that perception. It can stress the finances because Dad said, "Oh yeah, I think we got it." But so that consistency between the parents, and I'm gonna reiterate, whether you're married or separated raising a child. If they go to dad's house for 3 days and they get everything they want, ice cream, cookies, and the whole deal, and then they go to mom's and mom is tight because she's paying the rent and all that other stuff, there's things that the kids pick up against the mom and dad. So you got to have a consistent front between the parents. And then the last thing I'll say, and I'll stop, is that parents can't badmouth the other parent. They can do that face to face. If you have an argument with your ex or whatever, or your spouse, you can have that argument, but you don't do it in front of the kids. Then when you're with the kids and they say, well, mom lets me, then you can say, well, mom may have had a reason to do that for that day and blah, blah, blah. But then you can go back on the side and say, hey, why'd you do that? That's kind of destroying what we're doing. So I think those are all things that you can do to kind of not put that stress on kids and get them in the middle of it.
Yeah, so just kind of some input on what we've been talking about. Well, first off, like obviously financial trauma is difficult for everyone. The parents, especially, who are more in tune with what's going on and the mistakes they made. But the most important thing in terms of for the kids is being present, being supportive. Like not getting caught in the financial trauma and all the mistakes you made to where you're not engaged with your kids anymore. Like that will create the biggest impact for them. The best thing you can do is be present for them and be supportive and maintain that stability. And I know my mom said when she was growing up, my grandpa was they were living more like within a tight budget, but he'd have them paint the house together. He couldn't afford someone to paint the house, so they painted the house together. They felt involved, appreciated, and part of the family. And so like you don't need to buy your kids like PlayStation 5s and all that for them to feel loved and supported. It's to just be present and be engaged with them, and then no matter what you can do within your finances. The next thing would be the behaviors, and the kids can start to act out a little bit. And in terms of the younger kids, it'd be increased tantrums, changes in the way they play, just changes in the way they normally operate. They could be internalizing what's going on, and it could be like, changing their normal day-to-day dynamics. And as Richard said, as it goes into adolescence, it'd be school-related issues and mood swings, as well as social changes. Like if there's rising issues at schools, obviously a lot of parents are concerned when their kid has displayed a certain behavioral and temperament and throughout their life, and then it suddenly rapidly changes, and then they're trying to figure out where that might come from. And certain things with teenagers would be withdrawal, and increased responsibility. They start doing things, feeling that they need to contribute to the household. Maybe skipping school to take on certain responsibilities, and more risk-taking behaviors as well. And what parents can do is acknowledge the signs. So the most important thing is when you see your kid acting very differently than you're normally accustomed to them doing. Well, first off, the worst thing you can do is, put that in their face and like be very confrontational about it. You kind of have to come from a, hey, what's going on? I really care about you, very empathetic state, because if you push them, and kind of like very adamantly express that, what you see, they're going to be feel judged and reject that. So like the best thing you can do is come from I care about you, and I'm trying to figure out what's going on, and to normalize those feelings. Like they're probably feeling a lot of things that they probably haven't felt before, that they might feel guilty for, and they might create anger towards you. So it's really important to validate, normalize those feelings. It's okay, like it's normal to feel these things when we're going through the financial tribulations we are. And from that to encourage open communication. And the number one thing is just to model healthy coping. If a parent is having financial trauma and they're having anger tantrums and throwing things across the room, that normalizes that for the kids. So parents really in that situation have to show very healthy coping mechanisms, such as maybe going for a walk or meditating or exercising is another really good one. But if they can show their kids that even despite all the difficult challenges they're facing, that they can conduct themselves well and behave well and cope with these things well. That their kids can see, okay, like these are things we can navigate and not let it get the best of us.
Charles, that was amazing. Thank you for sharing. Because that's one of the things that, as I was hearing it, um, allowing people to think things are normal and that this is just a normal part of life. Because I think sometimes, especially as children, we kind of think people have a tendency to think that everything's always going to be good. And we're not taught or prepared for when things aren't easy. And it makes it tough. And then people get a lot of shame. They get triggered by things. They become more anxious. They just get this real big scarcity mindset that they use. And that changes their whole attitude. So I love what you're saying as far as being able to show them that you're there for them and that this is okay and this is normal. And really just looking at this as a temporary thing, and it's a challenge, right? It's an opportunity for us to think differently, for us to choose to do things differently. And I think one of the things that's helpful in what we use in the program is to ask people to set goals. How do we overcome this? Well, you set goals and then you figure out how to achieve them. So taking something that feels uncomfortable and turning it into a how do we overcome this? How do we learn how to think differently? How do we get other resources? How do we change what we do in order to make that happen? So I really appreciate what you had to say. That was very insightful.
Yeah, like most of the people end up in therapy, they come from households that the parent, I mean, it's very easy to let a child smile and be happy, but not as easy if they're very upset and agitated. And a lot of parents will see the behavior getting really angry and just say you're a horrible kid and not give them that space to express themselves. And that's where one therapist told me emotions always yes, behavior can be no. So parents really, especially when the kids are acting out behaviorally, to always validate the emotion, but not necessarily validate the behavior. So if your kid is skipping class because he has a lot of anxiety around the financial situation, to say, hey, it's okay to feel anxious. I get anxious, but you need to go to class. That's not okay. If that's what you're doing to cope with this, let's try to find a better way to cope with this that's going to be better for you.
Thank you very much, panel. I think that's all good suggestions. I think this series continuing on will help answer some other questions. And I look forward to having more of these panels as we go through. So thank you very much for your time today. And I look forward to meeting with each of you again.
To view the entire series, go to centralimpact.org.